Chapter 1. The Arrival of Spring. It was a quiet morning in the small village of Ashford, nestled among rolling green hills and hedgerows in the English countryside. Spring had finally begun to chase away the bitter grip of winter, and the air was soft with the promise of new life. Buds opened shyly on the apple trees, and lambs stumbled clumsily through the fields, their bleats carried on a gentle breeze. William, a young farmhand no older than 20, had risen before dawn as he always did. He lived and worked on the sprawling farm of Mr. and Mrs. Palmer, where he slept in a small room above the stable. William was a quiet lad, strong and reliable, but with a softness in his heart that often made him stop to watch the morning light through the mist. This morning, though, something felt different. The song of the blackbirds seemed more hopeful, and even the old barn cat rubbed against William's boots, as if sensing the change. William had a simple life, tending to the animals, repairing fences, and turning the dark soil ready for planting. But on this first true morning of spring, he paused by the fence and watched the sun rising behind the church steeple, painting the sky with streaks of peach and gold. He took a deep breath, filling his lungs with the fresh, damp air, and felt a quiet gratitude warm his chest. For a moment, he forgot about his sore hands and aching back. For a moment, he felt that he belonged to something bigger than his own toil, to the land, to the seasons, to the turning of time itself. A voice behind him broke the silence. "William, you'll be wanting your breakfast before you start with the lambs," called Mrs. Palmer from the doorway of the farmhouse, her cheeks flushed from the heat of the stove. William turned with a smile. "Yes, ma'am. I'll be right in," he replied, brushing straw from his sleeves. As he crossed the yard, he took one last look at the fields waking up under the new sun. There would be much to do in the days ahead, he knew, but for now, he let himself savor the simple blessing of this peaceful morning. William stepped inside the warm kitchen of the farmhouse, where the scent of fresh-baked bread and porridge filled the air. Mrs. Palmer, a kindly woman with gray streaks in her hair, and a strong, comforting presence, placed a steaming bowl before him. "You'll need your strength today, lad," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "There's fencing to mend, and the lambs are restless." William nodded, picking up his spoon. The porridge was simple, but it filled him with a sense of home. In a world that could be harsh and cold, there was something about a warm kitchen, a full belly, and a kind word that seemed almost holy to him. While he ate, William listened to the sounds of the farm slowly coming alive. The clatter of the milk pail, the cockerel calling from the yard, the creaking of the wagon wheels as the stable boy prepared to fetch feed from the mill. His thoughts drifted to the season ahead. Spring was always the busiest time, with new lambs to care for, seeds to plant, and hedgerows to cut back. It was hard work, but he liked the honest rhythm of it. There was pride in knowing the land would bloom because of his hands. Mrs. Palmer sat across from him, taking a sip of tea. "You've a kind heart, William," she told him gently. "Don't ever lose that." He looked up, surprised. "Why would I lose it?" She smiled, a little sad. "Because life can make folk hard, if they let it." William thought about that. The world was changing, with new machines and factories rising in the towns. Some people said that soon there would be no need for men like him, men who worked the soil. But here, on this farm, life still made sense. After breakfast, William stood and thanked Mrs. Palmer, then pulled on his worn coat and stepped outside again. The morning was brighter now, the mist burning away, and birds wheeled high over the hedges. He felt ready to face whatever the day would bring. William crossed the yard toward the lambing pen, where several ewes were pacing anxiously. A new lamb had been born overnight, small and shivering, and William's heart ached a little at the sight of its thin, unsteady legs. He knelt in the straw, murmuring softly so as not to frighten the mother, and checked the little creature for any sign of trouble. The lamb's heart beat fast beneath its tiny ribs, but its eyes were clear, and after a moment it let out a faint bleat. William smiled and gently guided it toward the ew's belly, where it could nurse. "Easy now," he whispered, stroking the mother's side. "He's yours to look after." He stayed there a while, watching them settle, letting the slow rhythm of the animals calm his mind. It was moments like this that made him feel truly alive, connected to something pure and timeless. As he rose to his feet, he noticed Mr. Palmer approaching across the yard, his heavy boots crunching on gravel. Mr. Palmer was a broad-shouldered man with a sun-creased face and a firm, honest voice. "William," he called, "when you've finished there, I need you to check the north fence." Some boards came loose in the winter storms. "Yes, sir," William answered. "I'll see to it right away." Mr. Palmer gave a satisfied nod. "Good lad, and don't forget, the traveling merchant is due tomorrow. Might be he has news of the world beyond Ashford." William paused at that. The world beyond Ashford felt far away, almost like a different life. Sometimes he wondered what it would be like to travel, to see London, or even cross the sea. But then he looked back at the lamb, at the ewe nuzzling its baby, and felt an ache of gratitude for the simple things he had right here. He gave Mr. Palmer a respectful nod and gathered his tools, preparing to walk out to the northern fields. The path to the north fields wound past a row of ancient oaks, their branches just beginning to blush with new green. William carried his hammer, nails, and a coil of wire, the tools bumping against his side as he walked. The earth was soft from spring rains, and birds darted in and out of the hedgerows, singing their cheerful notes. As he reached the fence line, William paused to study the damage. Several boards hung loose, battered by winter winds. With practiced hands, he began the work of repairing them, measuring, hammering, and tightening the wire so that no sheep might slip through. While he worked, he found his mind wandering. He thought of Mrs. Palmer's words that morning, "Don't ever lose your kind heart." It puzzled him a little. Had he really seemed in danger of growing hard? He was only 20, yet there had been days when the cold and the hunger, the loneliness, had almost closed him off. Days when it would have been easy to forget softness, to think only of himself. But somehow, he had always found a way back to gratitude. For a warm meal, a safe bed, the chance to see the world turning green again. He sighed, driving another nail into the post, and felt a sudden rush of calm. Gratitude, he realized, was not something that just happened. It was a choice, made over and over, even when life was hard. As the fence stood strong again under his hands, William straightened up, wiped the sweat from his brow, and looked across the field. A gentle wind moved through the grass, bending it like a soft wave. He stood there a moment longer, breathing in the scent of new earth and growing things, and felt a quiet peace settle around him. Chapter 2. The Merchant's Visit. The next morning dawned crisp and bright, with a sky so blue it seemed almost unreal after the gray months of winter. William rose early, as always, and tended to the animals before breakfast. His muscles ached from the fencing the day before, but there was a pleasant heaviness to it, the honest ache of a job well done. By mid-morning, the sound of wagon wheels rattling over the lane announced the arrival of the traveling merchant. His name was Mr. Hargreaves, a cheerful man with quick eyes and a voice as smooth as honey. Every few weeks he brought fabrics, spices, small luxuries, and news from beyond Ashford. William stood by the gate as the wagon rolled in, drawn by a stout grey horse. Mr. Palmer came out to greet the merchant with a handshake, while Mrs. Palmer watched from the kitchen doorway, drying her hands on her apron. "Well then, Mr. Palmer," Hargreaves called with a grin, "spring has woken your village at last." "That it has," Mr. Palmer replied, "and you've brought the sunshine with you, I reckon." William helped guide the horse to a safe place near the barn, while Mr. Hargreaves began unloading bolts of cloth and little pots of preserves. As William lifted a heavy crate, the merchant nodded approvingly. "Strong lad," he remarked. "Is he yours?" "Keeps the place running better than any two grown men," Mr. Palmer answered proudly. William felt a quiet glow of pride at that, though he said nothing. Compliments embarrassed him, and he preferred to fade into the background. As the merchant's goods were laid out, a small group of villagers began to gather, eager for new gossip, or a scrap of colored ribbon, or a bit of news from the wider world. William lingered near the wagon, listening as Mr. Hargreaves spoke of distant towns and new inventions, steam engines that ran faster than horses, machines that could weave cloth in hours instead of days. The merchant's stories seemed almost like magic, and William felt a strange pull in his chest, a mix of curiosity and unease. "Will they put men out of work, these machines?" asked one of the older villagers, a thatcher with bent hands. Mr. Hargreaves lifted a shoulder. "Some say so. Others say they will bring more food and more wealth. Only time will tell." William frowned thoughtfully. The idea of a world changing so quickly felt unsettling. Here in Ashford, life followed the same rhythm as it always had: planting, harvest, lambing, haymaking. Could these new machines really fit into that quiet pattern? Before he could dwell on it too long, Mrs. Palmer called from the house. "William, come fetch these eggs, will you? I'll trade them for some soap." "Yes, ma'am," he answered, shaking off his worries, and went to collect a basket from the kitchen. As he returned to the yard, he caught sight of a girl among the villagers, a slim girl with a neat blue bonnet and eyes the color of dark tea. She stood a little apart from the others, watching the merchant's wares with a shy curiosity. William had seen her before, once or twice, helping her grandmother in the bakery, but they had never spoken. For reasons he could not name, he felt a small spark of courage. As he passed by with the basket, he nodded politely. "Morning," he said, a bit awkwardly. She returned a gentle smile. "Morning." Her voice was soft, and something about it stayed with him as he carried the eggs over to Mrs. Palmer. The villagers continued to bargain and chatter, trading fresh eggs and butter for ribbons, needles, and news. William kept half an eye on the girl with the blue bonnet as he worked. She moved gracefully, almost like she belonged to another world, though her clothes were simple and patched. When the trading slowed, Mr. Hargreaves began packing away the last of his goods. William stepped forward to help, lifting a crate of empty jars into the wagon. "Thank you, lad," the merchant said kindly. "There aren't many as helpful as you." William ducked his head, embarrassed. "It's no trouble." Mr. Hargreaves glanced around the yard, then lowered his voice. "There's talk in the towns, you know, of people leaving the farms for the factories. Wages are better, so they say, but—" He paused, choosing his words. "The air's thick with soot, and the work is cold and heartless." William hesitated, feeling a pang of uncertainty. Factories seemed a world apart from the lambs and the green fields of Ashford. Still, a tiny part of him wondered what lay beyond the hills. Mr. Hargreaves seemed to read his thoughts. "Don't forget," he said, "there's more to life than coins and machines." William nodded slowly. Gratitude, he reminded himself. Gratitude for what he already had. As the wagon rolled away, William stood for a long moment watching the dust settle on the lane. Then he turned back to the farm, to the familiar smell of hay and fresh earth. He found himself thinking of the girl again, and the softness of her smile. Maybe, he thought, there was a kind of adventure to be found even here, in the quiet turning of spring. Chapter 3. A quiet connection. The next morning was filled with soft, drifting clouds and the scent of damp earth after a light rain. William went about his work with a steady rhythm, feeding the lambs, mucking out the stalls, checking the fences once more. But his mind kept drifting back to the girl with the blue bonnet. He wondered if she would be at the bakery today, and whether he might find a reason to speak with her again. There was something comforting in her gentle manner, something that seemed to echo the calmness of the land itself. By midday, Mrs. Palmer sent him to town to fetch flour from the bakery. William tied on his coat, tucked the coins into his pocket, and set off along the muddy lane. The village of Ashford was no grand place, just a handful of cottages, a smithy, the small bakery, and a church with a crooked steeple. But to William, it held all the familiar pieces of life that made sense. As he entered the bakery, a warm, yeasty scent wrapped around him, and he saw her again, arranging loaves behind the counter. She looked up and smiled, a shy spark in her eyes. "Good afternoon," she said. "Afternoon," William replied, trying not to sound nervous. "Mrs. Palmer sent me for flour." "Of course," the girl answered, reaching for the heavy sack. "I remember you from yesterday. William, isn't it?" He blinked, surprised that she knew his name. "Yes, ma'am," he managed. She laughed softly. "No need for ma'am. I'm Annie." He felt his heart lighten. Annie. It suited her. Annie hefted the flour sack onto the counter with practiced ease, brushing a bit of dust from her hands. William watched her, noticing the way a wisp of hair had slipped loose from under her bonnet. "Is spring keeping you busy at the farm?" she asked, filling the quiet. William nodded. "Plenty to do. Lambs, fences, planting." She smiled again. "My grandmother says spring is when the world remembers how to be kind." That made William pause. How to be kind? He thought of the lamb he had helped nurse, the fences he'd mended, and the warm meals from Mrs. Palmer's kitchen. Yes, perhaps that was true. "That's a good way to say it," he admitted. Annie's eyes warmed, and for a moment they simply looked at one another, two young souls caught in the gentle hush of the bakery. Then Annie broke the spell with a soft laugh. "Well," she said, "I'd best see to the bread, or Gran will have my head." William smiled, lifting the flour sack. "Thank you, Annie." "Any time," she replied. As he stepped back onto the village street, William felt something new blooming inside him, as fresh and fragile as the buds on the hedgerows. Maybe the world beyond Ashford was vast and uncertain, but here, in these quiet days of spring, there was something worth staying for. William made his way back to the farm, the sack of flour balanced on his shoulder. The lane was dappled with sunlight, the puddles from the morning rain shining like bits of sky on the ground. Birds trilled from the hedgerows, and the air was rich with the smell of damp earth and new grass. As he walked, he found himself replaying Annie's words in his mind. Spring is when the world remembers how to be kind. There was a quiet wisdom in that. He thought of all the hardships winter had brought, cold, hunger, worry, and how the world seemed to soften once the sun returned. He reached the farmyard to find Mrs. Palmer waiting on the steps. "Did you get it, William?" He nodded and handed her the flower. "Well done," she said. "There'll be bread on the table tonight, thanks to you." William gave a small smile and went to store his tools, a gentle peace in his heart. As the evening settled, he helped finish the chores, then paused by the barn to look out across the fields. The lambs were growing stronger day by day, and the grass was greening fast. There was hope in the air, as if the land itself was breathing easier. He leaned against the fence, letting the last light of day warm his face. In that quiet moment, he felt a gratitude so deep it almost brought tears to his eyes. For the land, for the Palmers, for Annie, and even for the honest ache in his tired muscles. Life was not easy, but it was good. And that, he thought, was enough. Chapter 4. A Sunday in Spring. Sunday brought a rare day of rest. The farm was quiet except for the soft bleating of the lambs and the distant call of a church bell from the village. William rose a little later than usual, letting the morning light spill gently over him through the small stable window. He washed up, brushed the straw from his trousers, and set off toward the village for the Sunday service. Mr. and Mrs. Palmer liked to attend as a family, and they welcomed William to join them as one of their own. Ashford's church was small, its stones worn smooth by centuries of prayer. Inside, the pews were polished by countless hands, and the air smelled faintly of beeswax and lilies. William found a seat near the back, feeling the hush settle over him as the vicar began to speak of gratitude and neighborly kindness. His mind wandered a bit, to Annie, to the lambs, to the fresh fields waiting to be planted. The world felt fragile in that quiet moment, but in a way that made it even more precious. After the service, the villagers spilled out into the green, exchanging news and small talk. William lingered near the church door, scanning the crowd until he caught sight of Annie, walking with her grandmother. She waved, and he felt a sudden warmth in his chest. "Hello, William," she called, stepping closer. "Isn't the day beautiful?" He nodded, returning her smile. "It is." For a moment, neither of them spoke, simply sharing the bright hush of the spring morning. Annie's grandmother, a small woman with a lined, kind face, joined them with a knowing smile. "William, isn't it? Thank you for helping Annie yesterday with the flower." William blushed a little. "It was nothing, ma'am." "Oh, it's never nothing," the old woman replied gently. "Kindness is never wasted." Annie looked down, cheeks turning pink, and William felt an odd flutter in his chest. It was a quiet moment, simple, yet somehow filled with meaning, like the way spring air carried the scent of new blossoms. After a pause, Annie asked, "Will you be coming by the bakery again soon?" William nodded. "Most like, yes." Her smile deepened, soft and a bit hopeful. "Then I'll see you." He watched as she and her grandmother walked away, her blue bonnet catching the sunlight. A strange happiness spread through him, something light and unhurried, like a new leaf opening on a tree. Mr. Palmer clapped him on the shoulder. "You coming home with us, lad?" William nodded, still watching Annie's figure grow smaller down the lane. As they began the walk back to the farm, William felt the quiet peace of a Sunday settle around him. Birds singing, the smell of fresh bread from a cottage window, the easy company of good people. Maybe he didn't need the faraway towns or their factories. Maybe the best kind of life was right here, built on honest work, gentle moments, and gratitude for the small blessings that came with each new dawn. The afternoon passed in a gentle calm. William helped Mr. Palmer tidy a broken gate, even though it was supposed to be a day of rest. Mr. Palmer chuckled as they worked side by side. "You've got a good heart, lad," he said, tightening a hinge. "Not everyone your age would spend a Sunday fixing someone else's gate." William shrugged with a quiet smile. It needed mending. Mr. Palmer nodded, satisfied. "Aye, that's true enough." They finished just as the sun dipped low behind the hedgerows, turning the sky into a wash of rose and gold. William paused to look at it, breathing in the cool, sweet air. These peaceful moments felt like gifts, too easily overlooked when days grew long and hard. As evening settled over Ashford, Mrs. Palmer called them in for supper. The table was simple: bread, cheese, fresh greens. But to William, it felt like a feast. Warmth from the hearth, a place to sit, kind voices. These things were worth more than gold. After they ate, he stepped outside for a final look at the night. The first stars had begun to pierce the blue, and a faint breeze rustled the hedges. William closed his eyes, letting the world quiet around him. He felt a deep gratitude for the Palmers who treated him as family, for Annie's gentle voice, for the land that fed them all. Gratitude is a choice, he reminded himself, hearing Mrs. Palmer's words in his mind. And I will choose it again tomorrow. With that, he turned back toward the soft glow of the farmhouse, ready for another day. Chapter 5. The Unexpected Storm. Monday began bright, the sunlight pouring over the fields like spilled gold. William rose early, whistling softly as he pulled on his boots. There was fencing yet to mend, and the sheep would soon be driven to higher pasture. But, as the morning wore on, dark clouds gathered from the west, rolling heavy and low across the hills. By midday, the wind had picked up, rattling the stable doors and sending the hens squawking across the yard. Mrs. Palmer appeared in the doorway, concern on her face. "Looks like a rough blow coming, William." He glanced at the sky, frowning. "I'll check the lambing shed. Make sure they're safe." She nodded, grateful. "Be quick about it." William jogged across the yard as the first drops of rain began to fall, sharp and cold. By the time he reached the lambing shed, the wind was howling, pulling at his coat and stinging his eyes. Inside, the ewes shifted nervously, the youngest lambs already bleating in confusion. William moved among them, soothing them with a calm voice, checking that the doors were latched and no water leaked through the old roof. A sudden gust slammed against the shed, making the beams groan. William steadied himself, heart pounding, but the old timbers held. "It will pass," he told himself, taking a steadying breath. "It always passes." The storm grew fiercer as the afternoon wore on. Rain hammered the roof, and the wind rattled every board in the shed. William moved carefully among the animals, checking each ewe and lamb, making sure none were caught in a draft or separated from their mothers. He paused at one small lamb, barely a day old, shivering against its mother's side. Gently, William lifted it closer to the ewes' warmth and spread fresh straw beneath them. "There now," he murmured. "Stay close. You'll be all right." Thunder cracked above them, shaking the rafters, and William felt a jolt of fear run through him. But he held steady, reminding himself of what Mrs. Palmer had always said. "A kind heart is stronger than any storm." As the worst of the wind shrieked around the barn, William stayed with the flock, refusing to leave them. It was cold, and his clothes were damp through, but he felt an odd sense of peace even in the chaos. Protecting these gentle creatures reminded him why he loved this work. The quiet courage it took, the patience, the care. Finally, as evening approached, the rain eased, and the wind dropped away to a tired sigh. The clouds broke apart, letting a pale sunset through, soft and comforting. William stepped outside, breathing deeply, drenched but relieved. The storm had passed. The lambs were safe. And as he stood in the fading light, he felt that same grateful calm spread through him again, the knowledge that even a rough day could end in peace if you held fast to kindness. William walked back toward the farmhouse, boots heavy with mud, hair dripping from the storm. As he crossed the yard, he saw Mrs. Palmer standing in the doorway, lantern in hand, her face lit with relief. "Are they all right?" she called. He nodded, tired but calm. "They're safe, ma'am. All of them." She smiled, warm and proud. "Come inside, William. You'll catch your death out there." He stepped into the cozy kitchen, where the smell of broth and fresh bread wrapped around him like a blanket. Mrs. Palmer fussed over him, pressing a warm towel into his hands, urging him to change into dry clothes. As he sat by the fire, the warmth crept slowly back into his bones. Mr. Palmer handed him a mug of steaming tea, and William accepted it gratefully. "You did well today, lad," Mr. Palmer said with quiet respect. "Storms come and go, but it takes a steady hand to keep things right." William lowered his gaze, a little embarrassed. "I just did what needed doing." Mr. Palmer shook his head. "No, William, you did what was right." William let the words settle in his heart. Sometimes, he realized, gratitude wasn't only about what you received, but about what you chose to give. Care, courage, steadiness. He looked into the flickering fire, listening to the wind die down outside, and felt a deep contentment. Tomorrow, the fields would begin to dry, the lambs would grow strong, and the world would keep turning. And for that, he was truly thankful. Chapter 6. New Hopes. The next morning dawned bright and clear, as if the storm had scrubbed the world clean. The grass gleamed, fresh and green, and birds sang so sweetly it was hard to believe the wind had ever blown so fiercely. William rose early, stretching his tired limbs, and stepped out into the sharp, cool air. The farm felt peaceful again, the sheep grazing quietly, the barns standing firm. He took a moment to breathe in the scent of damp earth and wood smoke from the farmhouse chimney. Mrs. Palmer met him in the yard, holding out a chunk of bread spread with jam. "Eat, lad," she urged with a motherly smile. "You've earned it." William accepted gratefully. "Thank you, ma'am." She studied him, her eyes kind. "You're a good one, William. The sort of family is glad to have nearby." He felt a swell of warmth in his chest at her words. Sometimes, a simple bit of praise could mean more than all the coins in the world. After he finished the bread, he went to check on the lambs, relieved to see them healthy and calm. New life was all around him, fresh and hopeful, and William felt as though the season itself was blessing him with a second chance. As he worked, he found his thoughts turning to Annie. Maybe, he thought, he might see her again that day, and maybe he would have the courage to say a bit more. Later that morning, Mr. Palmer asked William to deliver a sack of grain to the bakery. William's heart gave a quiet leap at the thought of seeing Annie again. He loaded the sack onto the cart, tied the harness, and set off down the lane, the ruts still wet from yesterday's rain. The village was lively that day, full of voices and clattering wagons. Spring had brought people out of their winter hiding, eager to trade, to gossip, to breathe the soft air. William steered the cart toward the bakery and was greeted by the sweet smell of bread rising in the ovens. Annie stood behind the counter, dusted lightly with flour, her bonnet set aside so that her brown hair framed her face. When she saw him, her smile lit up the room. "William," she said, with a warmth that sent a glow straight through him. "You've come to see me again." He laughed shyly. "Brought grain, actually." "Well, I'll still count that as seeing me," she teased gently, her eyes sparkling. He helped her grandmother carry the grain into the storeroom, then paused, working up his courage. "Annie," he began, voice a bit uncertain, Would you like to walk with me one evening, when you're done at the bakery?" She blinked in surprise, then smiled so softly it made his heart ache. "I'd like that very much, William." For a moment, everything seemed to go quiet. The chatter in the street, the creak of the sign swinging outside, even the ticking of the clock on the bakery wall. It was as if spring itself held its breath. Waiting. William nodded, cheeks warm, and felt the world expand just a little, like a bud beginning to bloom. William left the bakery with a lightness in his step that he hadn't felt in a long while. The thought of walking with Annie in the quiet evening filled him with a hopeful energy, stronger than even the spring sun warming his face. As he guided the empty cart back through the village, he noticed how much life had returned to Ashford since the winter. Children were chasing hoops down the lane, women chatted by garden gates, and the old blacksmith whistled a cheerful tune while mending a wheel. He felt deeply connected to it all, to the land, the people, the gentle routines that gave shape to each day. Back at the farm, William set about his chores with a new sense of purpose. He mended a loose hinge on the barn door, spread fresh straw in the lambing pen, and carried water from the well, each task grounding him in the steady rhythm of farm life. That evening, after supper, Mrs. Palmer noticed the calm happiness in his face. "You're a quiet one tonight," she teased kindly. "Got something on your mind?" William hesitated, then smiled. "Might take a walk with someone, one of these evenings." Mrs. Palmer's eyes twinkled. "Well, good for you, lad. You've more than earned a bit of happiness." As dusk fell, William stepped outside once more, the stars beginning to scatter across the darkening sky. The lambs were sleeping soundly. The wind was gentle, and the world seemed, for just a moment, perfectly at peace. Chapter 7. An evening walk. A few days later, with the chores finished and the lambs safe in their pens, William found the courage to walk down to the bakery as the sun slipped behind the hills. The air was still warm from the day, carrying the scent of lilac and new grass. Annie was waiting outside, wearing a simple shawl over her shoulders and that same kind, gentle smile. Seeing her made something peaceful settle inside him. "Evening, William," she greeted softly. "Evening, Annie," he replied, feeling a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the spring air. They set off together along the quiet village lane, the sound of their footsteps mingling with the distant evening bird song. William felt nervous at first, unsure what to say, but Annie's calm presence made the silence comfortable. "Did you always want to work on a farm?" she asked gently after a while. He thought about it. "I suppose I did," he said honestly. "It feels honest, you know. You see the work of your hands in every field." Annie nodded. "I understand. I feel the same. Baking bread, feeding people, helping them feel at home." They walked on in thoughtful silence, passing hedgerows bursting with blossom, the scent of damp earth rising after the last rain. William felt that, in Annie, he had found someone who truly understood the quiet pride of simple work. As they reached the edge of the village, where the fields opened wide to the evening sky, Annie paused. She looked out over the gently rolling land, a soft breeze stirring the loose strands of her hair. "It's beautiful here," she said quietly. "So peaceful." William followed her gaze. The fields were turning dusky gold as the sun fell lower, and the hedgerows seemed to glow with a last wash of light. In that moment, everything felt calm and safe, as though the world itself was taking a slow, grateful breath. "I can't imagine living anywhere else," he admitted. "Sometimes I wonder what it would be like in the cities, with all their machines and factories. But I think my heart belongs here." Annie smiled, a gentle warmth in her eyes. "Then that's where you should stay, William. Where your heart feels right." They turned to head back toward the village, moving slowly, reluctant for the walk to end. William felt a quiet courage growing inside him, as if this gentle, ordinary moment was giving him a new strength. "Annie," he said, voice soft but steady, "I'm glad you're here." Her eyes shone as she looked at him. "I'm glad you're here, too." They shared a smile, simple and unhurried, and William knew in that instant that gratitude wasn't just about the land or the work. It was about the people who made it all worthwhile. They walked the last stretch of the lane side by side, with only the hush of the evening and the faint rustle of leaves around them. William felt the world quiet down in a way that made every small sound, the soft crunch of their steps, the sigh of the breeze, seem precious. As they reached the bakery, Annie paused at the gate. "Thank you for walking with me, William," she said, her voice warm and gentle. He smiled, a bit shy but steady. "I'd walk with you any time." A faint blush rose on Annie's cheeks, and she laughed softly. "Good night, then." "Good night," he echoed. William turned and headed back toward the farm, his heart lighter than it had been in many months. The stars were beginning to burn clear above the rooftops, and he felt a quiet gratitude fill every part of him. He realized then that there was no grand adventure he needed beyond Ashford. No factory, no city lights. His life, humble as it was, felt rich with meaning, because of the people who cared for him and the land that gave him purpose. As he neared the farmhouse, he could see the soft glow of candlelight in the kitchen window, and hear Mrs. Palmer humming as she cleared the supper dishes. The air smelled of warm hay and fresh earth, carrying with it a promise that tomorrow would come, gentle and new. William took one last look at the stars before stepping inside, feeling deeply, wholly grateful. Chapter 8. The Promise of Spring. The days that followed were mild and gentle, the fields greening more with each sunrise. William settled back into his daily work, but something inside him had changed. Every morning seemed brighter, every simple chore more meaningful, as though the world itself had shifted into a kinder place. He found himself smiling more, humming small tunes as he worked, and even Mr. Palmer noticed. "You've got a light in your eyes these days, lad," he remarked one afternoon as they checked the lambs. William ducked his head with a shy grin. "Maybe I do," he admitted. The rhythm of the farm carried on, planting, mending, caring, and in the evenings William often found a moment to walk through the village, hoping to see Annie at the bakery or on the green. They would exchange a smile, a word or two, and William would return to the farm feeling as if the whole world had blessed him. One soft afternoon, Mrs. Palmer pulled him aside. "William," she said kindly, "you've been good to us, and we're grateful. You should know you're welcome here as long as you wish." Her words landed in his heart like warm sunlight. "Thank you, ma'am," he answered, meaning it with every part of his being. He thought again of gratitude, how it could bloom even in a life of hard work, if only you let it. That evening, William sat outside on the fence rail, watching the lambs settle for the night. The sky was brushed with soft lavender and peach, and a breeze carried the faint, sweet smell of the first wild flowers. He heard footsteps behind him and turned to see Annie walking down the lane, her shawl wrapped loosely around her shoulders. "Evening, William," she called, her voice gentle. "Evening, Annie," he answered, his heart lifting at the sight of her. She came to stand beside him, leaning on the fence. Together they watched the sheep grazing, their soft shapes moving peacefully in the fading light. "It's so quiet here," Annie murmured. "I think that's why I like it." William nodded. "The quiet makes you hear things better," he said. "Your own thoughts, the way the wind moves, the small kindnesses." She looked at him, smiling, and he found the courage to reach out and take her hand. It was warm and real, and something about the touch made him feel steady and whole. They stood like that for a long moment, not needing many words, letting the hush of the evening speak for them. Finally, Annie squeezed his hand. "You're a good man, William." He looked down, shy but proud. "I'm trying to be." She laughed softly. "You already are." In that gentle moment, William felt that spring had brought him not just new life on the farm, but a new life in his heart, one built on gratitude, kindness, and the courage to hope. The sun slipped behind the hills, leaving only a soft, pale glow on the horizon. Annie and William stayed by the fence, hands still joined, while the first stars slowly appeared overhead. William felt a deep calm settle over him. All the long hours of work, the winter storms, the aching cold, it somehow felt worth it now, standing there beside Annie, the promise of tomorrow blooming in both their hearts. Annie spoke quietly, as though not to break the peace. "Do you think you'll stay here forever, William?" He thought about it for a moment. "I think, as long as there's work to do and people who care, I'll stay." She nodded, seeming pleased with that answer. "I hope you do." A faint smile tugged at William's mouth. "And you?" She shrugged lightly, her eyes warm. "This village is my home, and I think it's nicer with you in it." William felt a glow rise through his chest that no words could fully name. Gratitude, yes, but also a quiet joy, the kind that stayed with you even through hard days. They said good night gently, parting with one last look that carried all the unspoken kindness between them. William watched Annie walk back along the lane, her silhouette small and graceful in the dusk, and felt an overwhelming sense of belonging. Tomorrow would come, with chores and mud and worries, but it would also come with hope, and that was enough. Chapter 9. The planting season. The next week brought longer days and warmer air, calling every hand in Ashford out into the fields. It was planting time, and William worked from dawn to dusk alongside Mr. Palmer, turning the rich earth and laying in rows of seed. Each day was hard and honest, leaving his arms aching and his boots caked with mud. But he welcomed the work. There was something deeply satisfying in planting hope straight into the soil, trusting the rain and sun to do their share. Mrs. Palmer sent them into the fields with bread and cheese wrapped in cloth, and William ate quickly, sitting on a fence post, watching the wind ripple through the sprouting grass. In those quiet breaks, he sometimes thought of Annie, imagining her in the bakery kneading dough, sharing laughter with customers. One afternoon, as they paused to rest, Mr. Palmer looked over the neat rows William had planted. "You've a steady hand, lad," he said with a nod of approval. William smiled, pride welling in his chest. "Thank you, sir." The farmer glanced at him, a knowing look in his eye. "Thinking of someone while you work?" William blushed, but nodded. "Maybe I am." Mr. Palmer chuckled. "Nothing wrong with that. It makes a man's labor lighter." William laughed softly, and in that moment the rows of seed, the green hills beyond, and the bright sky overhead all seemed to glow with promise. The days passed in their steady rhythm. William rose before dawn, worked until the shadows grew long, and fell asleep each night with the comforting ache of honest labor in his bones. The planting continued, row after row, until the fields seemed to hum with quiet hope. On Sunday, William took time to visit Annie again. The bakery smelled warm and rich, and she welcomed him with a smile that made every tired thought vanish. "I've missed seeing you," she told him softly, handing him a slice of warm bread. William smiled, grateful. "I've missed you, too." They sat outside on a wooden bench as the village went about its Sunday hush. Children playing quietly, the bell in the church tower tolling the hour. Annie talked of her grandmother's stories, of small things she noticed among the villagers, while William listened with an open heart. He realized then that Annie's kindness was like spring itself, gentle, renewing, and full of quiet strength. As he walked back to the farm that evening, William felt a peace inside him that no amount of coin or fancy machinery could have bought. The sky was alight with the last colors of sunset, and the air smelled of fresh-turned soil. In that moment, he knew there was no place he would rather be. That evening, as William sat by the fire in the farmhouse kitchen, Mr. Palmer spoke quietly. "You've grown since the winter, lad, not just in years, but in spirit." William looked up, surprised by the weight of the words. "The world outside Ashford may change fast," Mr. Palmer continued, "but it's men like you who keep the heart of the country alive, steady, kind, and true." William felt a warmth spread through him, deeper than the fire's glow. He thought of Annie, the fields, the lambs, and the simple joys that filled his days. "Thank you, sir," he said softly. Mr. Palmer smiled, a rare softness in his eyes. "No need, William. You deserve it." As the fire crackled and the night deepened, William understood something important. That gratitude was not just a feeling, but a way of living. A steady light that could guide him through any storm. He settled back into his chair, the quiet comfort of the farmhouse wrapping around him like a gentle embrace. Chapter 10. A spring to remember. The days grew longer, and the village of Ashford blossomed into a patchwork of green fields and flowering hedgerows. William worked tirelessly, his hands calloused but steady, his heart full of quiet hope. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky with shades of pink and gold, William stood beside Annie near the old oak tree at the edge of the fields. The air was soft with the scent of new blossoms, and the world seemed to hold its breath. Annie looked up at him, her eyes bright. "William, I've been thinking." He smiled gently, waiting. "I want to thank you," she said, "for your kindness your strength, and for reminding me what it means to be grateful for the simple things. William felt a warmth spread through his chest, a quiet joy that was more precious than any treasure. "Thank you, Annie," he replied, "for being here, for sharing this spring with me." They stood together in the fading light, two souls bound by gratitude and hope, ready to face whatever seasons would come next, together. And so, in the quiet village of Ashford, where the fields stretch wide and the spring winds whisper through the trees, William and Annie found a simple truth: that life's greatest gifts are often the smallest moments of kindness and gratitude. As the seasons turn and time flows onward, may we all remember to cherish the gentle blessings around us, the warmth of a shared smile, the strength in steady hands, and the hope that blooms anew with every dawn. Now, as you close your eyes and let sleep carry you softly, may your heart be light and your dreams be peaceful, wrapped in the calm embrace of a springtime night. Good night.